All right, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I'm Jennifer Pope Baker. I'm the Executive Director of Women's Fund of Central Indiana, and I am so happy to be hosting this event today on behalf of Women's Fund and welcoming Manon Voice with us for an extraordinary piece of art that she has created to share with us. So this spring, Women's Fund decided with great sorrow that we would not be hosting our event, Power of Women's Fund Philanthropy, this year. And that made us sad for many reasons. One, we love having the event. Two, it's our most important fundraiser and what fuels our community engagement. But really the most important thing is I always feel like the speaker that we bring to our community is a gift to our community, that we always have a woman who has a spectacular story to share. And it made me sad in a year that seemed like it was going to be pretty wonky when we were talking about this in April, that we wouldn't be able to have someone come speak for us. And I recalled hearing Manon Voice at an event last fall, and her spoken word poetry just gripped me. And so we decided within Women's Fund to commission Manon to create a spoken word piece for us that would help us remember and recognize and revel in the resilience and the beauty that we all hold within ourselves. And again, we made this decision in April, and we certainly didn't realize how much faster that roller coaster was going to go, and how when we got in line for that roller coaster, we didn't realize how many times it would go upside down and turn in loops and make us feel like our stomachs were bottoming out of our bodies. And so Manon has beautifully created a spoken word poem for us, and it has been created into a film. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to watch the film, and then Manon and I are going to have a conversation. And then we'll watch the film one more time, because I think that you might see it with new eyes after hearing from her. And then when it's over the second time, we'll come back just for 2 minutes, and we will be done at 1 o'clock. For those of you who have been to a Women's Fund event before, you know we start on time and we end on time. So just before we roll the film, I wanted Manon to say hello so you could see her.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. It's so great to be here, and I'm very, very excited about this work of art and to be representing something that I'm very passionate about, and that is the voices of women and the thriving of women and girls in our community. So just thank you for this opportunity, and I hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Manon. So one thing I'll say is Jerry Pagash, who works with me at Women's Fund, is going to share her screen so you can see the video. And so I would suggest that you take the little box that you're going to see that says Women's Fund of Central Indiana and just minimize that into the corner of your screen so you can see the film fully. So enjoy.
Bebe kunku adodo bale dororo alage moku ale ale o àwa ló ń ṣòro ilé o àwa ló ń ṣòro ilé o
Our histories did not begin when men decided to record them. The long capes of our chronologies yawn backwards into civilization's dawn, where there is no myth, lore, ghezo, or scripture to candle our presence at the table where the scribe once wrote, the congregation of sight in our eyes, the rhythm and dance of our visage, The siren songs of our feet and the work kneaded into our palms have conspired to be kept alive as memory. To be kept alive as memory, we rise early within the dark, lone temple to sinew the threads of our voices chorus, to hold the cup of listening against our bones, to heave ancient rivers of mirror from our marrow, seeing us when the world we made will not. Seeing us when the world we made will not, parting the clouds of witnesses, seeking the swells of cistern, who fold us into their bosoms like sons, who speak us into light, who pronounce our names as music again, who call us mother, daughter, sister, elder, and beloved, gathering us into bodies of belonging that do not feel like weapons or sound like machines.
Awa ni rumoleti pekum pekum. Awa ni rumoleti porisha orisha. Baja pape kungu adodo paleto roro. Alage moku ale ale o eh. Awa lo ṣòro ilé o eh. Awa lo ṣòro ilé o eh.
Sound like machines with memory, the history at our backs, bayonets of shadows, with hands and lands of harm we have fled, with child and grandchild under arm, making exodus of past, and memories untethered for survival's sake, sheltering in place after place, sheltering in place through crisis and catastrophe, through pestilence and poverty, through uprising and injustice, through addiction and recovery. We find the art of generosity and fierceness and give ourselves fully to the flame and mystery that asks, offering plates of our hands. Wherever there is work to be done in the world, there we are. We are the seed of the work, gifted to the world for the soil and ground of generations. For the soil and ground of generations, we toil for the promise of our daughters and stand in the lineage of our many mothers who ferried others to freedom, who braved Ellis Island, who refused to give up their seat, who gave their lives for suffrage, who marched and stood up to horsemen, who threw shot glasses at stone walls, who held the scepter stretching the distance of kingdoms, who defied the orders of kings and tyrants, who birthed ideas from the dark womb of innovation, who taught revolution, and who also sought peace. Systems that wound, that wages gaps in our value, that bruise our crowns with ceilings made of glass, that deny us seats at the tables we furnish, that say our black lives do not matter, that bow the tall necks of our girls growing into queendom and freedom, that make commodity of our flesh and build walls wrapping the long halls of our histories with the bigoted hushes of refusal. We have mourned at these wells of silence long enough, paying homage to our sorrows with sackcloth and scarlet letters that do not belong to our names. to our names will no longer. Their names will be ones of alchemists, transmuting pain into passion, limitations into options, and past of imprisonment into new promised lands, impoverishment into new seeds of hope, inviting their lives into the full breaths of second chance and first wish. Together, we swell and rise again, making and unmaking ourselves at the bright summon of each morning, throwing off stricture and censor, placing boundaries around our love, saying no, and living our deepest yes. And yes, we are still here at the table where the scribe once wrote, holding script and quill, the anvil of our will, embodied legacies. We are becoming and unbecoming, stories made flesh and making flesh, extending the long feast table of time and chance for every woman and girl, no matter her place, race, or identity. Of course, the future looks like us in our fully vestured, miraculous power. Of course, the future is us. For we have been builders and makers of each and every beginning, coming into a late, ageless, and eternal light.
Wow, that was amazing. I saw a little technical difficulty there, as I'm sure many of the people on here have had on a Zoom before. Manon, that's beautiful. I love it. And of course, I have seen the drafts of this, and it just grips me. And the language, and then the visuals that Lugal created to go with your words, and it's absolutely remarkable. And I want to sort through a lot of different aspects of that with you, but let's first start by exploring your words. So we ask you to create something that celebrates the resiliency of women and girls in our own community. So tell us about the process that you use to explore this resiliency.
Sure. So thank you just so much. And I just want to say really what a privilege and honor it is for me, and it was for me to be called upon by the Women's Fund of Central Indiana to create such a piece that had the mission like this of empowering and uplifting and highlighting the strength and resilience of women and girls. I do not take that lightly. And so just thank you, Jennifer, for entrusting me with this project and with something that was so monumental and so significant. And I consider the ethos of my own work to be very, very rooted and centered in the woman's work, what I call the woman's work. And I share this story. I've shared it with several people, but I grew up with a strong matriarchal imprint on my life, and I didn't have a chance to meet any of my grandfathers or great grandfathers, but I had the chance to know both of my great grandmothers, which is kind of rare, like for some people, and then both of my grandmothers. And my two great grandmothers lived a very long life, almost to be 100. And so I grew up watching women, and I grew up watching the work of women. I grew up watching women be strong and resilient. My great grandmother on my father's side was actually born in the late 1880s. And so she was born in Mississippi, and she was a sharecropper. So she was only, 20 to 30 years removed from the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed slaves. And so she had 13 children. She was a sharecropper. She migrated to Indiana during the Great Migration, during the Jim Crow era, as a Black woman, and trying to survive. And, her husband had died, and she surely had a lot of struggles, a lot of obstacles to overcome. But she had such a resilience and a beautiful and dignified strength. And so even if I wasn't able to sort of articulate that, I grew up watching that, and I grew up seeing that, in the many mothers in my life. So I already feel like I had this sort of inner narrative of what strength and resilience looked like in women. And then it was my job from there to go out and to build upon that and to collect the substantive evidence. And so I liken my commission process to being that of a sculptor. I like to amass a lot of material. I like to amass a lot of information, and then start to chisel away from there and start to extract what is important here, what really needs to be said. And so I did that, by creating a process that would really center me in this work, the way that a journalist or a reporter would. And so I had a chance to, have this 3-tier level of interviewing the board, and then interviewing you and the wonderful staff at the Women's Fund, and then also interviewing the grantee organizations that you fund. And so I wanted to start with interviewing the board for the Women's Fund, because I wanted to talk to the people who were creating the decisions and who were casting the vision to make this mission possible. And so, so it was an honor to speak with, many members of the board and to really learn about their passion. And, I asked them questions like, what is your own personal passion when it comes to seeing women and girls in Central Indiana thrive? And I remember one board member saying, it's reconstructing the dream. And that really stood out. And then I heard another board member say, my passion is economic independence, seeing women and girls be economically independent and have economic mobility. And so I was jotting all of that down, and then interviewing you and the staff, because I wanted to know about what the operational process looked like throughout the organization, and the day-to-day work of what this looks like in mobilizing people, ideas, and investments, so that every woman and girl can reach her full potential. And so I remember asking questions of the staff, like, what do you think are some of the biggest barriers to, women and girls in our community being able to thrive? And some of those same reoccurring themes with the board came back up. It was economic independence. It was young women being able to have mentors. And so I took that, and then interviewing the grantee organizations, the organizations who you fund and who are working at a grassroots level and who are serving, right, these women and girls who are engaging with the community. And so I remember asking certain questions of the leaders of organizations like Dress for Success and Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, and asking them about, tell me about a real narrative of how you have seen the women and girls who you serve exhibit strength and resilience, especially during a time like this. And so I got a lot of narratives from those leaders. And so I gathered that. And so it was me just sort of amassing all of this information, and I, of course, looked at some information that you provided about the organization, infographics and articles. Those were all very, very useful to my process. And it was important for me to be able to do that so that the piece had real authenticity, that it had real credibility, that I was really talking to the women in the work, and also talking to the women and girls of our community. That was very, very important. And so this piece is very much informed by that process.
Thank you. It's exciting to see how you go through all of that, and then how you did chisel away, and your remarkable words began to tell the story of the women in our community. But the story of resilience changed a lot since our first conversation as the pandemic grew and people's concern or lack of concern about the pandemic changed significantly since April. And then, of course, our country is experiencing a racial reckoning that is unlike anything that I've seen in my lifetime. So how did those two things change the trajectory of your work?
I think the work really, especially as it pertains to the pandemic, the work really became more urgent. And it was important for me in the piece, in the not only in the communities that I work in, and the ways that I saw women and girls being impacted, by the pandemic and what was happening, and suffering from job loss or unemployment, or trying to figure out how they were going to care for their families, or send their children to daycare with limited options. But I also heard very much so from the organizations who you fund that there were women who were really, really struggling during this time. And so I knew that I had to create something that was actually that was real and that was authentic to their struggles. And I think when we talk about the work of women, and all that we do to, we are mothers and partners and CEOs and volunteers, and we do all of this work, and sometimes that work can be very glamorized, but it's hard. It is hard, and we can make it look easy, but it's really hard. And so I didn't want to create something that felt, cover girl or, too like plastic. I really wanted to create words that really reflected how women were thriving right in the middle of crisis, right in the middle of pestilence. And so that line block where you hear, sheltering in place after place through crisis and catastrophe, through pestilence and impoverishment, through addiction and recovery. That was a sort of condensed, frame that was really illuminating the real life stories that I was hearing from the women who had really been facing a lot of challenges during this time, but were also working to overcome and working to maintain their resiliency.
When you talked about the words that you were crafting together, one of the things that impressed me so much was the enormity of your vocabulary in this piece. And it made me think about how in day-to-day life, most people have a vocabulary that shrinks down to here, and that we don't use all of the wonderful words that we know that describe things with much more texture and experience than we typically accord our conversation. So I appreciated that and felt like it was a good challenge to me to use all of my words and not just some of them. So thank you for that challenge. So as you began to piece together what became Feast Table of Our Future, I'm curious about what surprised you, what delighted you, or if anything discouraged you during that process.
Sure. I during my writing process, I like to kind of just see myself as the vessel, and then the words, becoming downloaded. And so I remember, when I first started, the first couple of stanzas just sort of poured out, and I really did. I loved the first stanza that talks about, our histories did not begin when men decided to record them. That wherever there has been a table in the world, even if we are not historically documented, we were there. We were there. And I loved using the metaphor of the table that is representing our visibility and our work, and also equitable opportunities. That was a very, very powerful metaphor to use. And that was also something that I kept hearing all of the women and the young women who I interviewed say, we want the same opportunities, we want the same chances. And so the hardest part of writing a poem for me is sometimes closing out the piece. And I'm always thinking about, like, how do I wrap this up in a way that brings it home, but that also doesn't sound just like very like redundant. And so, like, I had just kind of been sort of sitting and sort of sitting with it. And then the long feast table came to me, and I saw that, yes, the long feast table of time and chance for every woman and girl to have equitable opportunities and to reach her full potential, no matter her place, race, or identity. And so I loved that the first stanza, the first stanza connected with the last, and it bookended, and it brought the whole piece together. And I didn't, create like some kind of outline, like that just like happened. And I was like, yes. So yeah, so that was a really surprise and a delight. As a poet, there was nothing really discouraging to me about the writing process itself. I really do enjoy that, but I am always wrestling with, language, and, and so I do like appreciate, you speaking to the textures of how we use language, because I'm always sort of wrestling with, as a spoken word artist and as a poet, how do I keep this poetic, but also make it accessible to people who may not be familiar with poetry? So that's kind of always kind of a tension, that I have to kind of like work between worlds, and so to remain really rooted in the vocation and the craft of poetry, but also really dilute language to make it very accessible to people. That is also important. And so I'm always just kind of self-critiquing, like, did I do that right? Did I do that well enough? So I can say that those voices were like in like my head, and I kept, wrestling like with things like, is this, the right thing to say in the way that I want and that I feel. But to me, a poem is a living, breathing piece. And so it's always living, and it can even change. And so that's kind of how I reckon like with that.
I love that. And I really appreciate the fact that through Women's Fund, not only are we able to introduce you to people who might not be familiar to your work, but also to people who aren't familiar with different kinds of poetry. Someone was saying yesterday to me that they were describing this to their family members and said, well, it's not like Dr. Seuss poem. It's not, you know, and I was telling somebody, it's not like it's this rhyme about Women's Fund and it rhymes, you know, what rhymes with fund and what rhymes with grant
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so,
Right.
but I think that for some people that's their only experience with poetry.
Absolutely.
And so I love that we can introduce a new kind of poetry to people through this. And so you know, when you think about the full body of your poem, share with us how you see Women's Fund reflected in those words. You know, I really see it and I feel it, and I'm just curious to hear that from your point of view.
Yeah. Well, you know, when I was looking at all of the organizations who are impacted by the Women's Fund of Central Indiana, and what I saw was this broad and beautiful intersectionality of so many women with different narratives and with different backgrounds and with different experiences and with different stories. And so it was an important task for me to try to represent intersectionality, that women are not a monolith, you know, that women and girls are not a monolith, that there are a lot of things, that there are a lot of aspects that make up who we are in the world. And so even the film, right, really reflects the diversity that I see in the work that the Women's Fund is doing by funding so many organizations with women from all kinds of walks of life and who are bringing different life experiences. And, you know, the piece is also important for me to sort of translate your mission, because I saw your mission as actually empowering women and girls to become resilient, like by providing the resources, right, where they can be strengthened and where they can do that, where they can be strong and where they can thrive in the community. And so I very much saw the mission of the Women's Fund being connected, to the strength and resilience of women and girls in the community, and that you as an organization are, you know, casting this vision of leadership, so that women can have equitable opportunities. I also heard very much so this concept of legacy. And I heard that when I was, you know, talking with the board and when I was talking with a lot of the staff members and some of the other leaders of the grantee like organizations, is that they were saying, you know, this is not just about me. This is about my daughter, and this is about my granddaughter, or this is about my niece, or this is about the girls that I am mentoring. So this work that I'm doing is not just about me. I want to leave a legacy. And so the end of the piece, when you hear it say, the girls that belong to our names will no longer, that was that turning point that cast the vision of a future where all women and girls really are sitting at this table. And I love that idea of a feast table, not just a table, but a table where women and girls are full. You know what I mean? Like where they have everything that they need, where they have the resources, where they are empowered, where they are strong. And so I saw the mission and the work of the Women's Fund as being directly transferable and directly relatable to the strength and resilience of the women and girls in our community.
I love how you said, seeing the women and girls at the table and they're full, right? And
Yes,
that made me think
yes,
that that table should be, it should be enormous, but it should be round, because that
absolutely,
everybody
yes,
has an equal space at that table.
yes,
And it's interesting. That's something I've said about Women's Fund for a long time, is I really want all women in our community to feel like they have a place at our table, and that their voice is represented at our table. And
yes,
we are striving at Women's Fund to make sure that um, women can look at the people who are the decision makers for our work and see themselves represented, and feel like that there is somebody who looks like them, who has a life experience like them, that is helping make decisions to impact our community. And that's really important. And we'll continue to hold that image of being full
a
at the
feast
table.
table, yes, full, yes,
Full,
we are full.
the,
And
the,
that is the title of the piece, right? Feast table of our future. And that was what I saw, was, was this long table. And I like that, you even say round. Where women and girls were full. I saw that in my mind. And so I knew, and it sort of took me a little while to come up with the title, because you kept asking. I said, oh yeah, like, I'm sitting with it, but as soon as I got it, I knew that was supposed to be the title, because that is the vision of this piece, the feast table where we're all full.
the feast table. Well, and that's an important remembrance too, because we can't just invite people to the table. That when they're at the table, that we need to make sure that their chairs pulled up, and that they are invited to speak if they're hesitating to speak, and that they're full, that they're fully represented, that their bellies are full, that their brains are full, their hearts and their wallets are full. And it reminds me of
Yes.
when Women's Fund invited Mrs. Obama to be our guest a year and a half ago, and she talked about, if you have a seat at the table, you're required to use it, and if you're not using it right now, to step back and let somebody else use that. And because sometimes, we just aren't in a space where we can be full, and we need to step away and tend to ourselves, or have somebody tend to us until we can be back at that place. But I feel like everybody who's at the table has a responsibility to take care of the people who are also at the table. Kind of like on the plane, when the face masks drop, you put yours on and help the person next to you. That we need to do that at our tables.
Yes, yes, yes.
So while you were creating this piece, I would guess that you had images floating in your mind of that attached to your words. And so
yes, I did.
I'm wondering what it felt like to turn that over, to have it be made into that somebody else was interpreting your words and putting them into film. And so I want to know what it felt like to turn that over. And then I've got some follow-up questions on that.
Sure. Yeah. So it was like, a piece of art. And once like, it's like birthing like a child. And so I was very protective, like, of it. So I had seen the work of Lugao Casper, and I knew that he could create something beautiful. And I said, and the first time, like I said, we've got to create something beautiful, something tender, and something that's going to be timely and timeless. And I knew that he could create a beautiful work of art, but I was so protective of it. I was so protective, and I was very involved with every detail of what was shown, every shot. So I was really involved, in the production process. I wanted to be, there, so I was there, for the shooting and organizing. I wanted to be involved in every detail, because I wanted to tend this like a child, and to really make sure that it was going to reflect the vision that I felt in my heart. And so that was, and that was kind of a new venture also, because like we brought in a director of photography, and then, we had two production assistants. And so it was also bringing, kind of like a whole team of people, and, and just trying to sort of keep the vision, keep the integrity of the vision, even in collaboration. And so it was a great learning process, but I think that Lugao, did an excellent job with visual artistry of it. So I'm very, very thankful.
So when you saw the final product, I mean, obviously you knew what it was going to look like because you were so intimately engaged, but did you see your words in a new way through the film? Did it make you think of new things?
Yes. You know what? I saw, as the film was going through like edits, and, and I kept saying to look at, like, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. It's almost there. And there was an edit that I saw that really made me cry. And I was like, this, we've gotten there. Because what I saw is that even though in the piece, I am highlighting struggles, I am highlighting, real life experiences. And so, you're gonna, you hear, women who have had to flee domestic violence, women who are, thriving through illness and through impoverishment. And so the piece is rooted, I feel like, in struggle. But when you watch the film, all of the women and the girls in the film, it gives a feeling of happiness and of thriving. And what I realized is that, like all of these women, like allowed us into their spaces, doing what they just do, right, on an everyday basis. None of this was staged. Like all of it was, we were coming into the spaces of, women, so when you see Yuzuri Assad at the beginning with her newborn baby that she just had a couple of weeks ago, she let us into her home, and like while she was bonding with her, and that was so powerful. And so I just thought, wow, even with all that is going on, women and girls are still thriving. We are still caring for babies. We are still baking cookies. We are still, we went to Franklin, Indiana, and where Michelle Dahl, who has a food pantry where she feeds people, and and she was gardening and she was feeding people. And we went to Lawrence Community Gardens where Sharana Moore was harvesting, crops. And so we were getting real life, like real life's narratives of women doing the work and actually thriving. And so that brought me such peace that, the girl who was playing soccer, right? She goes out every Sunday and she kicks around the ball, right? And that's what she does for her self-care. And so as I saw the piece, I was like, wow, women and girls are really, so it just reinforced that, yes, what I already knew, that no matter the obstacles, no matter what we face, that we have something in us that allows us to just thrive and to be strong and to be resilient. And I saw that in the film, and all of that was natural. All of that was organic. And I just had the privilege of being able to witness it, right? And to put that into words. But that's what really made me see the piece in like a new way.
I love that. So I have a question that we didn't talk about earlier, but I just thought about this. Do you mind sharing the blooper about when you were filming the violin scene of what happened to you? Because what happened is kind of funny, and also your response to it, I think, is fabulous. It's a good lesson
Mm,
for people, how you responded.
yes. And so uh, this was sort of a surprise, kind of spontaneous mission that Lugal Casper, the director, so we asked Crystal Ford, who is a violinist who's playing the violin, and she's an arranger. We wanted her to contribute to the film, and but Lugal was so he was so gung ho about having her play her violin in the middle of White River. And so he said, yeah, it's going to be not only is it going to be a powerful shot, but it's going to bring healing to the waters here, through sound medicine. He brings a lot of sensitivity and spirituality to what he does. And so he says, yeah, he said, there's this spot, so he sort of took us down to White River and said, yeah, there's this spot that we're going to get this shot. It's right over there. Just like follow me. And so Crystal and I start to follow him, like across just kind of like what looks like it's kind of just surface level mud. But as I start to walk through it, it was deep mud. Like, so I sunk. It was sinking. it was damp sinking sand. So I sunk, and the mud was up to my knees. And Lugal, Crystal somehow did not sink. So I was really stuck where I could not get myself out. And so Lugal took Crystal across the waters and kind of, and then he said, I'm going to come back for you. And he literally started to film her and left me stuck in the mud. And I was just like, oh my gosh. But it was like something just kind of like came over me, and I was very amused. But it also felt like just this really powerful lesson that I needed to learn, because of the difficult year that I have even had, due to COVID and deaths in the family and loss of opportunities. And so I feel like I was just as I was being held by the mire, I just knew that I was supposed to learn this lesson of just being still where I was, letting the mud hold me. And then when he finally did come to pull me out, I lost both shoes. The shoes, they're gone. And so I walked back to my car, and I had mud all over my pants, and I had lost these cute shoes. And it just felt like that on the path of, like, on this journey of life, that like it's a constant process of surrendering and of, giving up things, and of transforming. To transform and to change, we are always, it feels like, giving up something. But for that, we are also always finding new pieces of ourselves. And for some reason, like, even though I was so muddy, I felt like the lens of my heart had been cleansed. Like, it was a spiritual experience. And so I have that. It's a behind the scenes blooper. You guys can have it if you want, but it was very, very powerful, like, for me.
It was, you told me that you had a story about that, and then I saw when you posted about it on Instagram, and I thought a couple of things. One is probably Women's Fund should buy you a new pair of shoes. And then I thought, I wonder what's going to happen someday, decades or centuries down the road. Somebody's going to find these shoes, and what story will they conjure in their mind? But I also thought about that, like that sort of spiritually thinking Mother Earth was holding on to you. Just needed to be held and to be centered, perhaps. And I think that in your telling of the story, you answered the question I was going to ask you next was, what did you discover about yourself regarding resiliency? And I think that you already answered that. And so what I'd like to do now is to show the film one more time so people can see it and listen to it in a new way after hearing from you. And for our guests who have been with us, well, right as soon as we're done, we're going to come back for about 30 seconds to just wrap things up. So enjoy this last look at the film.
Our histories did not begin when men decided to record them. The long capes of our chronologies yawn backwards into civilization's dawn, where there is no myth, lore, ghazal, or scripture to candle our presence at the table where the scribe once wrote, the congregation of sight in our eyes, the rhythm and dance of our visage, the siren songs of our feet, and the work kneaded into our palms have conspired to be kept alive as memory. To be kept alive as memory, we rise early within the dark, lone temple to sinew the threads of our voices chorus, to hold the cup of listening against our bones, to heave ancient rivers of mirror from our marrow, seeing us when the world we made will not. Seeing us when the world we made will not, parting the clouds of witnesses, seeking the swells of cistern, who fold us into their bosoms like sons, who speak us into light, who pronounce our names as music again, who call us mother, daughter, sister, elder, and beloved, gathering us into bodies of belonging that do not feel like weapons or sound like machines. Sound like machines with memory, the history at our backs, bayonets of shadows, with hands and lands of harm we have fled, with child and grandchild under arm, making exodus of past, and memories untethered for survival's sake, sheltering in place after place, sheltering in place through crisis and catastrophe, through pestilence and poverty, through uprising and injustice, through addiction and recovery. We find the art of generosity and fierceness and give ourselves fully to the flame and mystery that asks, offering plates of our hands. Wherever there is work to be done in the world, there we are. We are the seed of the work, gifted to the world for the soil and ground of generations. For the soil and ground of generations, we toil for the promise of our daughters and stand in the lineage of our many mothers who ferried others to freedom, who braved Ellis Island, who refused to give up their seat, who gave their lives for suffrage, who marched and stood up to horsemen, who threw shot glasses at stone walls, who held the scepter stretching the distance of kingdoms, who defied the orders of kings and tyrants, who birthed ideas from the dark womb of innovation, who taught revolution, and who also sought peace. Sought peace, and yet we war with systems that wound, that wages gaps in our value, that bruise our crowns with ceilings made of glass, that deny us seats at the tables we furnish, that say our black lives do not matter, that bow the tall necks of our girls growing into queendom and freedom, that make commodity of our flesh and build walls wrapping the long halls of our histories with the bigoted hushes of refusal. We have mourned at these wells of silence long enough, paying homage to our sorrows with sackcloth and scarlet letters that do not belong to our names. The girls that belong to our names will no longer. Their names will be ones of alchemists, transmuting pain into passion, limitations into options, and past of imprisonment into new promised lands, impoverishment into new seeds of hope, inviting their lives into the full breaths of second chance and first wish. Together we swell and rise again, making and unmaking ourselves at the bright summon of each morning, throwing off stricture and censor, placing boundaries around our love, saying no, and living our deepest yes. And yes, we are still here at the table where the scribe once wrote, holding script and quill, the anvil of our will, embodied legacies. We are becoming and unbecoming, stories made flesh and making flesh, extending the long feast table of time and chance for every woman and girl, no matter her place, race, or identity. Of course, the future looks like us in our fully vestured, miraculous power. Of course, the future is us. For we have been builders and makers of each and every beginning, coming into a late, ageless, and eternal light.
Oh, that is so lovely. I am so grateful for everybody who joined Women's Fund today for this panel, and the conversation with Manon was wonderful. And I hope that this helped for many people to identify perhaps their own strength and resiliency if you've perhaps forgotten about it. And I want to thank our friends at Indianapolis Power and Light and Tanya Savinsky for their generous sponsorship of the film. And we've recorded the session today and we'll post it on our blog. And then we will also be posting our the video, the film, on all of our social media, and that will happen either later today or tomorrow. And I thank you for everybody who's here. Most of you have been donors of ours in the past, and for that I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful in advance to all of you who may contribute to Women's Fund once again this year and in the future. And Manon, I'm so grateful you captured Women's Fund, what we admire about the women and girls in our community. You captured that so well. And I will let you have the last word before we sign off.
Thank you so much for this honor. And it is I feel like if women and girls can look at this and see themselves and hear themselves in this piece, then that is my honor and my work is done. And so I'm so, so grateful and so privileged to have this opportunity. So thank you to everyone who participated and who were with us today to witness this. And peace be with you, and let's keep drawing from our strength and our resilience, because we have it.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.